Hello students, welcome back to the part 2 of stereotyped behavior. In the part 1, I had just given introduction about reflexes. Reflex is an automatic, involuntary response when you are exposed to a stimulus. The stimulus can either be from outside or from inside. If the stimulus is from outside, you will try to avoid the stimuli if it is harmful. For example, if you touch a hot surface, you withdraw your hand. If the stimuli is from inside, for example, the carbon dioxide buildup is more in the blood, then you yawn more to take in more oxygen, and that's a response for maintaining internal homeostasis. Vomiting, coughing, sneezing are activities for maintaining internal homeostasis, which I had spoken in the first part. Now we shall continue with the second part. In reflexes, there are two types, tonic reflex and phasic reflex. Tonic reflex will take place in a given pace of time. It is slow and it takes time, like the development of postures in the baby. Phasic reflex is a fast action. It is called as flexion response. Now, when you are exposed to the stimuli, you show the response. The time between the stimuli, exposure to the stimuli to showing the response is called as the latent period. If the stimuli is strong, the latent period is less. If the stimuli is weak, then the latent period is more. So I told you tonic reflex is the one which takes its own time for development. For example, the different types of postures which is exhibited by a developing baby. If you look at the growth of the baby, first it will grasp your finger, then it will turn to its side, then slowly it falls on the abdomen, then it crawls, it raises its body with four limbs, then it will sit up, it will stand and start walking. These change in the postures during the developmental stage gives an example for tonic reflex. When we say reflex action, it involves reflex arc. So for this type of response, there is a structure which is responsible for showing such quick reaction, which is called as the reflex arc. It is a very simple pathway found in the nervous system. It is a pathway in which the stimuli, information from the stimuli is taken to the nervous system, and then it goes either to the brain or to the spinal cord, which in turn will give messages to the target organ. So if you look at the components of reflex arc, first of all, there are 5 components. First one is the sensory receptor. The sensory receptor is the one which will receive the stimulus. From the sensory receptor, sensory neuron will pass the stimuli to the central nervous system. Then the integration can happen either in the brain or in the spinal cord. From the brain or the spinal cord, motor neurons will carry the message to the effector organ. Generally, the effector organ will be a muscle which shows coordinated contraction and relaxation, bringing about movement, or it could be a gland which results in secretion of some it could be a hormone or an enzyme depending upon the stimuli. So there are 5 components: sensory receptor to receive the stimuli, sensory neuron to carry the stimuli to the central nervous system, brain or spinal cord where integration will happen, motor neuron will carry the messages to the effector organ. The effector organ is muscle or gland. Now, reflexes can be categorized into two main groups. One is the somatic reflex, the other one is the autonomic or visceral reflex. We will see what do you mean by autonomic reflex. Depending upon the effector tissue, we classify the reflexes into autonomic or somatic. If the effector tissue is not under your control, it is involuntary, it is part of autonomic responses in the nervous system, you call it as autonomic reflex. Some of the tissues which come under autonomic control is the smooth muscle like what you find in your digestive tract, the cardiac muscle of the heart, and the glandular tissue. So here both the brain and the spinal cord can act as integrating centers. They can take in the stimuli and give the response. Either brain can do that or spinal cord can do that. Some examples for autonomic reflexes are when you look at food or when you think about food, if you smell food, then you will start either producing saliva in the mouth or start secreting gastric juice. All these are examples for autonomic reflexes like that. Regulating the blood pressure, regulating the heart rate, regulating the breath rate are all examples of autonomic reflexes. The second type of reflex based on the type of the effector is called as somatic reflex. Here the effector tissue is skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is under your control. You can decide what you have to do, whether you have to sit or stand or move. So it is under your conscious control. You can control the activity of the skeletal muscle. This type of reflex is called as somatic reflex, which is under your conscious control. So, for example, you can control your breath rate. When you do pranayama, you can increase the inhalation and exhalation rate. That is your conscious control of breathing. Or when you are swallowing, you can control that. You can blink your eyes if you need, and when you touch something, you can pull away your hand or you can walk away from a sharp object. All these will come under somatic reflexes, wherein the skeletal muscle is performing the activity voluntarily. There are three common somatic reflexes. So one is the stretch reflex, which is shown in knee jerk. When you sit on a chair, and there is an experiment in which when somebody hits on the knee will reflex. It produces a jerk. This is called a stretch reflex shown in the patella region of the knee. Withdrawal reflex, when you touch something hot, you pull away your hand. That is called as withdrawal reflex, or it could be crossed extensor reflex, wherein you will stretch out your muscle to do something. Extensor means you are extending your muscle to do some sort of activity. So these are all the types of somatic reflexes. Now, based on where the receptor is located, you have different types of receptors which will receive the stimulus and bring about reflex action. If the receptor is located on the outer surface, you call it as exteroreceptor reflex. If the receptors are inside the body and brings about reflex action, you call it as enteroreceptor reflex. If the receptors are located on the skeletal muscle, you call it as proprioreceptor reflex. And when the stimuli is taken to the central nervous system, not only the brain, even at the level of the spinal cord, the information can be integrated, because some actions need immediate response. So for which the stimuli need not have to travel all the way to the brain. At the spinal level itself, integration can happen. Then you call it as spinal reflex. So if it is on the stimuli is received on the lower part of the body, it brings about spinal reflex. If the stimuli is received on the upper part of the body, it brings about cranial reflex. Apart from this, you have something called as conditional and unconditional reflex. Conditional reflex is you don't know how to swim, but when you learn to swim, you never forget. Similarly, cycling, driving, all that, you are learning it and conditioning your body to do that activity. So there is also the dog's experiment called Pavlov's experiment, where the scientist rang the bell and gave the food. So after a few days, when the bell was rang, the dogs will start salivating. So this is conditioning the dog to salivate. These are examples for conditional reflex. One example for unconditional reflex is contraction of the pupil, which I have already spoken about in the part 1 video, wherein if you go out in a bright light, your pupil will contract to limit the amount of light entering your eyes, and when you come inside a room where the light is not enough, you will go blind. Then slowly the pupil will relax, allowing more amount of light, and then you will be able to see in the dark room. This you don't have to do anything, it happens on its own. So it is unconditional reflex. So with this we completed reflex behavior. The next one what we have to do under stereotype behavior is motivation or drive. What do you mean by motivation or drive? Now we know that when an animal is exposed to a stimulus, it shows response. But sometimes what response is which it shows is not same. It is different at different times, and that depends upon the state of the animal. We can take an example of African lion. This African lion, when it is hungry, it tries to find the prey. It goes in search of the prey, it hunts and kills, and it will eat. Once the African lion hunts and eats and it is satiated, it is full, the condition is satiated condition, then it will sit down and relax. At that time, if a prey comes close to that, it doesn't do anything. It simply ignores the prey and it just casually is sitting there. This state is called as satiated state. Now, for the lion to show hunting behavior, what is the cause? It should be hungry. If it is hungry, it shows hunting behavior. If it is not hungry, it simply ignores the prey. So there has to be a force or a drive to show the behavior of motivation. So if you look at the sequence of the motivation, you will see that an animal will exhibit the goal-oriented behavior. So what is the goal here? When the animal is hungry, that is the drive. When the animal is hungry, with the drive, the lion goes in search of the prey, that is the stimulus. So searching the prey is the goal searching phase. Once it finds a prey, it hunts, kills, and it will consume. That is the consummation act phase. After that, it simply sits and relaxes. It is called as quiescent period, during which even if a prey comes close to the predator, it doesn't cause any harm to the predator. This type of action is called as fixed action pattern, which we have already studied in the first part, where we gave an example of egg-rolling behavior in grey-lag goose. So this sequence of action which happens in a pattern is called as fixed action pattern. So scientists have tried to explain the neurophysiological aspect of motivation behavior. If you look at your own physiology, the amount of urine produced is not the same throughout the year. during summer, you excrete, the amount of urine excreted is less compared to that which is excreted during winter. That is because in summer we have to regulate our body temperature, we have to maintain it constant, so the excess of heat is dissipated in the form of sweat. So here, what plays a role to control the volume of urine production in your body? It is the hormone which is secreted from the brain on the ventral surface of the cerebrum. There is, below the diencephalon, there is hypothalamus, where you have adenohypophysis and neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis secretes antidiuretic hormone, which is responsible for absorption of water. You have studied all this in your PU class. So this antidiuretic hormone is responsible for absorption of water. So the absorption of water will be more in summer and it will be less in winter. As a result, more amount of water is excreted in the form of urine. So this is how neurophysiologically the urine secretion happens, control of the urine production happens in human beings. So there are many examples which are controlled this way, like your sleep behavior, the sexual behavior, emotional behavior, maternal behavior are all examples, and this is controlled by neurophysiological pathway as explained in the case of antidiuretic hormone. So hypothalamus has got two regulatory mechanisms. One is it will excite, another one is it is inhibit. Whenever there is a need, then excitation will happen. When there is no need, then inhibition will happen. So when there is a need, there is a drive, you call it as excitatory pathway. When there is no need, when the animal is satiated, it doesn't show the behavior, you call it as inhibitory pathway. So this is how the motivation is controlled by the brain, and in turn both the nervous system and the endocrine system together will control the behavior of the animal. So with this we completed the motivation behavior. Now we shall look into what do you mean by innate behavior or instinct behavior. The behavior which comes by birth. It is inborn. It is not learned. It doesn't go anywhere to learn. This type of innate behavior is called as instinct behavior. One which is coming by birth is instinct behavior. So this behavior is complete. There is no need for any kind of experience, or there is no need to learn this behavior. It is a fixed type of behavior. It doesn't change, and it is inherited from one generation to another. What examples can you give for instinct behavior? If you look at animals in the wild, they display lot of behavioral patterns to attract the mate, which is called as courtship behavior. For example, the bird singing songs. Generally, in birds, the male will display courtship behavior to attract the female. This is an example for innate behavior. In the wild, the animals will mark their territory. There will be different ranges, core range, home range, wherein the animal will select a place which is rich in resources, where it can find food, where it can give birth to the young ones, it can protect its young ones, and it has to mark its territory with pheromones. This marking the territory is the territorial behavior, which is again an example for instinct behavior. And also if you look at in wild, there is a hierarchical system. The one who is dominant will be the superior one who doesn't listen to anybody, and all others will have to follow this one. This superior one is called as the dominant one or the alpha. If it is a male, you call it as an alpha male. If it is a female, you call it as an alpha female, and all others will listen to that. This is called as hierarchical system. Again, an instinct behavior. Migration, where you look at the birds which migrate from one part of the world to the other, which is again an instinct behavior. People used to think that the migration is because of the experience which they have got earlier. But when they studied, they saw that during migration, they migrate from one place to another for the purpose of reproduction. So after reproducing, if it is so, if the experience is playing a part, then the adult should go first, followed by the young ones. But when they studied, they saw that the young ones are reaching first and then the adults follow. So experience is not playing a role over here, and it is an example for instinct behavior. The migration happens just by birth without any effort. It happens automatically. So like that, estivation, hibernation, which the animals will exhibit to avoid extremes of climatic conditions, the circadian rhythm, what we will be doing in the next chapter, the aggressive behavior which the animal shows, are all examples of innate behavior. Here you are seeing some examples. In the first picture, the baby is pulling its leg, putting its toe and sucking the toe. Or if you go close to the baby, if something touches the cheek, the baby turns towards that. That is sucking behavior which the baby exhibits so that it can get milk. So this is an instinct behavior what the baby has obtained by birth. Then the male frog, once it matures, it starts producing sound to attract the mate. Again an instinct behavior. The turtles, when they hatch out, they swim towards the sea as soon as they hatch, which is again an example for instinct behavior. So other examples what we have learnt, the grey-lag goose egg rolling behavior. Similarly, when the mother bird feeds the young one, the mother bird on the beak will have a color patch. So the young one will go and peck on the colored patch present on the beak. Once the baby bird pecks, then the baby bird opens the mouth and the mother bird feeds the young one. So this is called as food begging behavior, which is found in the gull, the bird gull. So what the baby bird does, it pecks on the beak of the mother, which has a colored patch. It pecks on that, for which the mother, after pecking, the baby bird opens the mouth and the mother feeds. The another classical example for instinct behavior is nest building behavior. If you look at the variety of nests made by the birds, it is so fantastic. They never go anywhere to learn that behavior. If you look at the tailor bird will select broad leaves. It brings the leaves together and it pierces the edge of the leaf with the beak, and it sews the edge of the leaf with silk-like material. By doing that, it is stitching the sides of the leaf and making a pouch in which soft material is stuffed and eggs are laid. Similarly, you have the weaver bird, where the bird will take some strings and weave the nest. You must have seen this nest present on the water bodies. It will hang down vertically. On the top side of the nest, there is a small part with which it is hung on the branches of the tree. Then there is a broader part, and then again there is a narrow part. In this narrow part, there is an entrance. So when the birds enter, they make a platform, and one small entry space is also left. The birds enter inside. They rest on the horizontal platform, and there the eggs are laid and young ones will be taken care of. So the nest building behavior is very fascinating, what you see in the wild. Similarly, if you look at the way the spider will spin the web, you must have seen the cobweb. Some of them are quite big. If you go to the wild forest, there you will see between two trees which are quite apart, the spider will spin the cobweb. It takes only about half an hour for the spider to make such a big cobweb. It has got silk gland, and it has got 3 pairs of spinnerets. So through the spinnerets it secretes a liquid which is a scleroprotein, and this liquid when exposed to air it hardens. So when it starts making the cobweb, first the spider will make a Y alphabet like structure. So this is called as the Y scaffold. It forms a frame, and to this Y it goes on spinning the silk like circularly it goes on making the cobweb. Then it makes spirals, the vertical bars to support the cobweb. So if you look at the way the spider spins, so perfectly it does without any learning or without any effort. Here you can see the picture of the tailor bird, where you can see the tiny bird is stitching the edges of the leaf, making the pouch in which the eggs are laid and the young ones hatch out. In this picture you can see how the cobweb is made. There is a initially Y scaffold, then the circular threads are formed, then it is supported by the radial spokes. So these are examples for instinct behavior which comes by birth. And you can see here how beautifully the honey bee will make the honeycomb perfect to scale, hexagonal cells, end to end it is joined, no mistake anywhere, so perfectly it makes the honey cell without any effort. So with this we completed the first part of the stereotyped behavior, wherein we did kinesis, taxis, then we did reflex action, then motivation, and then instinct behavior. So with this we completed the first part. Then in the next video, that is the third video, we will be doing learned behavior or acquired behavior. So thank you all students. If you have got any doubts, you can get it clarified by typing on the chat box. Thank you all.